Hello and welcome to the ScatterVolt channel, and today I want to bring you guys my updated $500 gaming PC build for 2021. I told you all I'd wait until stock and availability gets better before I produce my next build guide, which is why I'm happy to report everything you see in this video can be found in stock, not overpriced, and all in brand new condition in the description below. So in today's PC build guide video, I'll be showing you how to build this PC, the parts that I chose, how to install Windows 10 through our sponsor DigitalChillMart, as well as the drivers you'll need and the setup stuff you'll want to do before you get to gaming. And then of course, the gaming and streaming benchmarks on this PC, and we'll close out the build guide with my final thoughts on this computer and if you should actually pull the trigger on it or not. Disclaimer, the Xbox Series X, Series S, and even the PlayStation 5 will massively outperform this gaming PC. So if you're strictly looking for a gaming device, 100% get one of those consoles over this PC. But if you've decided you still want a computer, of course for those desktop functionalities, like if you're a student and you're looking for a gaming and desktop computer, this is actually gonna be the best you can build without going with like a used component for a $500 gaming PC. And fortunately, this PC is designed for future-proofing, so if you did want to slap in a high-end graphics card in the future, I'll show you how you can anticipate for that through the part selection with this PC build guide, so you can throw in your future RTX 3070, RX 6600 XT, and have a proper gaming PC. Hopefully, if graphics card stock and availability gets better throughout the coming months. So to begin building this PC, all you're gonna need is a Phillips head screwdriver and an 8GB or bigger flash drive. This is what you're gonna install your Windows 10 media installation device onto. This is what you're gonna plug into your computer before you boot it up so you can actually install Windows 10 and do all that stuff. And all you're gonna need to actually assemble this PC, other than your hands, is a Phillips head screwdriver. So for the processor, motherboard, and RAM for this build guide, I have chosen the Intel Core i3-10100F, the ASRock B560 Micro ATX motherboard, brand doesn't matter, it can be any B560 motherboard, and 16GB of dual channel 3200MHz DDR4 RAM. Starting with the processor, i3-10100F, quad core, 8 thread, can go up to 4.3 GHz, and quad cores are still worth it in the year 2021, especially for a budget gaming PC like this, because the nearest competitor to this, the Ryzen 3100 and 3300X, have not been found in stock on retailers like Amazon for a long time. So this really is your only option, and fortunately, it's still a very good one. Now for the motherboard, like this ASRock one that I have here, literally feel free to choose any B560 motherboard of your liking. Any of them will do fine in this PC build. This is just the one I happen to use for this video, though there are some of them out there that come with built-in Wi-Fi if that appeals to you. Otherwise, you need to get yourself a separate dedicated Wi-Fi card for a motherboard like this. Now, the cool thing about these is, even though out of the box they can support 10th gen processors like our i3, they can also support 11th gen processors. So if you were at all maybe distraught by the core mount on the i3, you can upgrade to like an i5 or i7 processor later down the road that's 10th or 11th gen that could be on discount, especially when you consider that Intel's 12th gen chips are going to be coming out very soon next year. So that might be a good time to upgrade if you're looking for a CPU upgrade. But otherwise, this sort of motherboard can handle all of it. And the higher end you go for B560 motherboards, I'd say the better you are in terms of future proofing for the types of chips you can throw onto this motherboard. This is probably the cheapest B560 motherboard you can get on the market, and I preferably wouldn't throw in like an i7 crazy chip because the VRMs might just not support it that well. And yeah, for the RAM, 16GB, 3200MHz, nothing complicated there. Just make sure that it's dual channel. If you go with a single stick of 16GB of DDR4 RAM, you are going to be severely hindering the possible performance of this gaming PC. So we're gonna open this up. We're given our manual here. You're obviously gonna need this. If you don't know where to put something, use this. This will tell you everything. This is your I/O shield. You're gonna need this. Here are your SATA cables, and you will need one of these for the SSD in here. So go ahead and unlatch this right here, pull this open. All of the pins that are gonna make contact with your processor are right here. Here's our CPU. There is the triangle on the bottom left. Gonna line up with the triangle on the bottom left of the socket. To make sure it's kind of in there, kind of wiggle it around a little bit. And if it doesn't move much, that's good. Maybe give a little bit of a visual inspection. It's in there. And it's okay if this black piece stays on because it'll pop right off once you put this back down. So make sure this little latch here is behind the screw. Bring the lever down and this black thing should pop out. Or if it doesn't, you can just take it out. And there's our CPU in the socket. It should look like that. The letter should read like normal. That indicates obviously that your CPU is in the right orientation. That's not a complex part, but let's go ahead and put in the RAM and the CPU cooler. Okay, this shouldn't be too hard. So the RAM's gonna go in one way because the two slots right here are not the same size, they're different. So I believe it's gonna be facing this way. Just kind of slide it in there, see if it's gonna fit. If not, flip it. This way is gonna fit. And just make sure you use two hands, press down. There you go. And let's put in the second piece. And yeah, easy peasy. Now for the CPU cooler, more or less, you're just gonna be putting it along these four holes. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's get it over with. All right, take out your CPU cooler. Here it is. Can't really see it that well, but there is thermal paste already pre-applied, so you don't need any. Make sure the Intel logo, if you're able to see it, make sure this is facing upwards so you can just read it legibly. And yeah, just put these across the four holes. You should be able to hear some clicks. If not, just do a double check. And to make sure that it's in, you can pick it up and the motherboard won't drop. If you want to make sure it's all the way in there, you can check these little plastic prongs that come out on the other side of the motherboard and see if there's a little black thing that kind of slightly sticks out. If that's the case for all four prongs, you're good. Last thing we want to do is to take this and put it right here. This is the CPU fan header. This is what's going to control the CPU fan from the motherboard. This is going to go in one way. There's like a little black piece right here, and it's going to line up with these white ridges here on the CPU fan connector. And yeah, easy. Legos. What else do I gotta say? It's Legos. Quick note, throughout this tutorial, you'll see that the actual motherboard that I ended up using is not the one you see here, because originally this build guide was meant to be used with an AMD Ryzen processor, but that changed because the i3 I really wanted for this build guide now has reliable stock and availability. So even though the motherboard and processor is different, trust me, the installation process is the exact same. Both motherboards you're gonna be seeing are micro ATX, budget. They have their IO and ports like that nearly around the same area on both motherboards. There's not gonna be that much differences. And trust me, if there are any differences and if you're confused, refer to the motherboard manual. It'll tell you exactly where to plug in what. And you know what, for the motherboard I used here, I'll go ahead and throw some screenshots of the manual just in case. But if you have any confusion at all, read the manual, because that's what it's there for. Now for the power supply, storage, and case, I have chosen a 500 watt Aries Game 80 Plus bronze power supply. I have a 500 gigabyte SK Hynix Gold S31, I think, SSD, that's 500 gigabytes, and this Antec NX410 ATX case. The 500 watt power supply used in this build guide is going to be plenty, especially for this graphics card and processor. But if you did want to anticipate a graphics card upgrade, I would look at the 650 watt or 750 watt versions of that Aries Game power supply if you want something still relatively within this price range, but can support like an RTX 3070 or an RX 6700 XT later down the road. So first things first, let's flip around and see what has come with the PC case that we can use. If we look right here in the hard drive bay, there might be something for us. There's this little box here that says Antec. So here is our case manual. We're gonna need this. And here are the screws and other accessories we'll need to top off the build. So here in the case manual, it'll pretty much tell you how to install pretty much all the parts that are gonna go inside of this PC case, from the motherboard to the graphics card. And if we flip it around, the power supply here, SSDs, hard drives, fans, so on and so forth. It's all given to you in the manual here, so definitely take a look at it. Since we have the backside open, let's take care of the power supply right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. And there we are. We're given our actual cable that will plug from the back of the power supply into our wall socket. Here's our power supply and cables. If you think your power supply is defective, it does come with the power supply tester. That's what I'm talking about right here. So this is really handy, which I doubt you'll have a faulty power supply if this thing is brand new, but who knows. And then we're given some screws and some zip ties. We'll only need these screws to put in the power supply, but these same screws also come with the case. To install the power supply, make sure the fan is facing downward, as you can see from these vents right here. So take this, just put it in. I mean, it's a power supply, come on. Just leave it there, go ahead and get your screws. Where are they? And yeah, you pretty much just screw in the screws into the power supply from the outside of the PC case. Nothing crazy here. It's literally just screwing things in, guys. Nothing too crazy here. And then for the case, I really can't say much because it does the job. The Antec NX410 has a mesh front, so it is going to deliver airflow directly into your PC. It's not a flat front, so if you did throw in any high-end graphics card in the future, it won't be struggling for air, which is good. It also comes with 3 120mm fans that are RGB, and you can actually control with the reset switch. Don't worry, in the tutorial, I'll be showing you how you can do that. And it can support 1 hard drive, pretty good build quality. I like how with the acrylic glass side panel here, this can actually hinge and you can take it off like I'll show you here on video. It's pretty cool. But all of this, for what was $60 when I got it, it's gone up in price a little bit, I think is still a fantastic deal for a PC case that's gonna have everything that you need. And now that is done, let's go ahead and flip around the PC case and install the motherboard. And this case is pretty cool because you can, it's all it takes to take off the side panel. But before you get all excited and just want to install the motherboard straight up, don't forget your I/O shield, this shiny thing that came with your motherboard. So to install this, all you gotta do is bring it around here. There's these pokey bits. You want that to be facing inward. So we're gonna flip this around. And since our motherboard is gonna be flat on the case, we want all the ports to be on this side of the case because the motherboard is not gonna be the other way around. And to actually put this in, just gonna need to give it a little bit of effort, a little bit of time, and some patience. Just gotta line up the corners, click in one corner at a time. Press in all around the I/O shield, and yeah, it's in. Now, before you put the motherboard into the case, you're gonna notice something weird. If I go ahead and kind of just airball it, you'll see there's these black screws right here, and you may be like, wait, what are those doing there? The motherboard's obviously not gonna reach it. The reason for that is because those standoffs are for an ATX size motherboard, which is what this case is originally intended for, but we can still use our smaller motherboard in this case, and I'm gonna show you how. So you got 2 options here. You can either move these 2 to this spot and this spot, or find your included baggie that came with the case and find 2 extra standoffs that actually came with that baggie and put one here and put one here. So now that we have our two standoffs to allow us to use our smaller motherboard with this bigger case, now let's actually go ahead and install the motherboard. And I mean, pretty much just put it in there, line it up with the IO shield. I'm doing this one-handed, by the way. It's all right if it like squirms around and such, it's okay. There we go. Something I like to do to help me line up the motherboard with the case is to kind of just look from the IO shield and just press in and make sure all the ports are lined up, and that'll give you a good idea if your motherboard is aligned or not. So if we look at the actual manual here, when we install the motherboard, the screws we're going to use are going to be these. These came with the case, and we're going to put all of these along the standoffs on the motherboard. Now, one thing important to note as you're doing this is if you start with one screw, don't screw it in all the way. Once it's in the thread, just leave it. And then go ahead and get another corner on the motherboard, like this one over here. Screw this one in like halfway, not all the way. And then rinse and repeat across the motherboard. The reason why we do this and we don't just tighten one screw at a time fully is so that we can apply equal pressure across the motherboard as it's being installed in the PC case. Now I've got all the screws screwed in halfway, and I'm just going to go across each corner and tighten each individual screw. And there we go. Now for the SSD, there's nothing crazy about it other than for its price, you're given DRAM. And I really like seeing DRAM and budget SSDs like this one because it'll preserve your read and write speeds over time as you use your gaming PC. And there are a lot of other budget SSDs around its price range that don't have DRAM, as you can see on screen, and I really don't recommend those because the second you start filling up that SSD with storage, it's gonna slowly diminish in read and write speeds, and I just wouldn't do that for a budget gaming PC since you're already so strapped on cash. So take any advantage you can with the part selection, which is why I have chosen that 500 gigabyte SSD. Next, I'm gonna install the SSD, and I already know where I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna put it right here behind the motherboard, and where I found this is actually on the manual right here. We're gonna go ahead and put it right there. And yeah, let's unbox our SSD and screw it in. So here's our SSD bracket, here's our SSD, and we're gonna install that onto this with the same screws that we used for the motherboard. So make sure, of course, that your ports are facing downwards on this. We're gonna flip this over, line up the SSD with the screw holes, and yeah, we're just doing a leisurely screwing in session for the SSD. Okay, and put it like that. Take the screw that you used to take off the bracket back in its place. Line up the hole. And there you go. Okay, so pretty much at this point, other than the graphics card, you are done with building and assembling, and now it's just hooking everything up. And the first thing you'll notice whenever you open up the back side of this case are all these cables, and I'll show you what all this is on top of all the power cables here. So all these white cables right here are for the fans and the RGB that controls them, and really all this is already done for you. All you have to do to power them up is to supply a Molex power to this connector right here, which I'll show you what that is in the power supply. It's not that hard. And then these black cables right here are your front I/O, so your onboard USB port, audio jack, and that sort of stuff that you'd find on the top of your PC case. And then this is all your power cables, and that's actually the easiest of the bunch. But this part right here is nothing to be scared of. It's required on every computer, and trust me, on a budget computer, this is not going to be that bad. So we're going to start off by taking care of all the front I/O cables, so the USB 3.0 header, the HD audio header, USB header, and then all those small individual front I/O headers. And the first one I like to take care of is the HD audio one because it's always going to be on the leftmost side at the bottom of the motherboard, no matter what brand you choose, and this one's pretty easy. And where I found this was on the motherboard manual. It said JOD1, and we're going to go ahead and put this in to these pins. Next, we have our front USB 2.0 header, and where you put this, again, you can find it on the motherboard manual, but here on the motherboard, it just says USB here all along the pins, and it doesn't matter which slot you put it in. Right next to it is where our big USB 3.0 header is going to be going into, so this blue connector. And I mean, pretty self-explanatory. There's going to be this little notch that lines up with the top of the 3.0 header and goes in. Finally, we have our front panel header, so our power button, power LED, HDD LED, that sort of stuff. This stuff is not that bad to install, and where you can install it and how to do it can be found on the motherboard manual right here. Again, just look at your manual on your phone or what's provided in the box. But I'm just going to go ahead and start plugging these in according to the layout. Next, we're going to start taking care of power, and we're going to start off first with the CPU power. Now we're going to take care of the motherboard power connector, which is the biggest one that you'll find from your power supply. This one goes on the left side of the motherboard here. There's a little clip. We want to line that up with this clip right here. There you go. Now let's take care of the SSD and how to power up our fans and our RGB controller. So to power up the SSD, use a SATA connector, and you're going to want to plug in on the bottom side. There will be a dedicated port for it. And then here we're going to use our Molex power connector to plug in our fans and our RGB controller. And that's it. So before we move on, one thing you might notice is there's power running to the SSD, but how are we going to actually connect it to our motherboard so it's recognized by our PC? And to fix that, we're going to use one of these SATA cables that came with our motherboard box. So take one end of your SATA cable and plug it in basically right here underneath your SSD. And then put the other end in any of these ports right here. These are your SATA ports. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this one right here. Okay, quick word on cable management, and I wouldn't actually manage your cables until after your system posts and it boots, just so this can be the last thing you can do. So cable management doesn't have to be crazy or insane, especially for a budget PC like this, but there's 3 things I like to follow. The first one is, for the CPU power cable, you will almost always can just have it looped right here to the back side on the right of the PC case and have it kind of tucked in right here. You can always do this on nearly every PC case, and for the zip ties, I just went ahead and used some that came from the power supply box. And then the other place I like to do a little bit of cable management is right here along this main column where you have your motherboard power, front I/O, and other things. I just kind of want to just put it into one column right here, and there's some loops that I did that with, again with zip ties. But other than that, I just shoved everything else into the bottom compartment of the PC case and call it a day. Because after all, this is only a $500 gaming PC. All right, we've made it to the graphics card, my favorite part of this video, and we have chosen the good old trusty GTX 750 Ti. Now, why am I going with this super budget graphics card? And the reason is, it's one of the only ones available that is in stock, brand new, and comes with a warranty, and is actually going to fit in our budget range for this gaming PC. This right now costs about $110 shipped, which is why I'm recommending it. It's so cheap, it's almost going to be like a burner card. It's just something temporary for until you can get an actual legitimate high-end graphics card, but still, it's gaming performance. If you're at least playing free-to-play games like Valorant, Apex Legends, and those sort of games, it's still going to handle those pretty well. There are of course limits to it, like if you wanted to play an actual high-end AAA title like Battlefield 2042 or Forza Horizon 5, but thankfully there are other versions of this card on AliExpress, like with a 4GB VRAM buffer, or even an RX 560 4GB graphics card, which would actually do pretty well for only an extra, like what, $35. So I do have other graphics card options throughout this video. So if there's any part of this gaming PC you can spend a little more money on to get more performance, absolutely get a faster graphics card like that 4GB RX 560 I was showing you guys earlier. Regardless, in the benchmarks you'll be seeing soon and the streaming benchmarks, it'll be all done on this basic $110 2GB GTX 750 Ti, and I think you'll be really surprised by the results. Now the final part of the PC build, putting in the graphics card, and this, not that bad again. So we're just gonna go ahead and put the card into this right here, the topmost slot on the motherboard. But before we do that, we have to remove some PCI covers here, so that way we can actually have access to our display ports and such. But for these, looks like we just have to bend them out of the case. Now let's take it, slide it right in. And once it's in, just press. You should hear a little click, and now the card won't come out. And now you just have to screw it into the case. While you're at it though, remember that PCI power cable I was talking about earlier? Now it's time to use it. Like that, and put this in. There you go. Now to actually screw in the graphics card into the case, we're gonna push this back, and we're gonna reuse the same screws that we used for the power supply, so these thicker ones, to put the graphics card into the case. And I like to take care of the bottom most hole because that is the one that's actually gonna support the majority of the weight on the card. So hopefully by this point you should have everything installed into the PC case and you should be ready to boot it up and install Windows 10. So before you do any of that, make sure you get out your keyboard, your mouse, your headset, whatever you're gonna have for audio, your monitor, all that, even your Wi-Fi adapter if you have one of those lying around, or if you already have it in your motherboard, have that all ready. And don't forget to plug in the HDMI cable from the graphics card to the monitor. Otherwise you'll be like, why is my PC black screening? And I'm like, well, that's because you didn't plug in the HDMI cable. Yeah. Then go ahead and grab your power supply cable from your power supply box, plug it into the power supply and plug the other end into the wall socket, flip the switch on the back of the power supply from the circle to the line, press the power button, and hopefully you'll arrive to a Windows loading screen and then the Windows installation screen, which will look purple. If your PC immediately doesn't boot up, the first three things I check would be: 1, make sure the power switch on the I/O pins on your motherboard is in the right spot. If it isn't, your PC is just not gonna boot up because of your power button. It's not like a structural damage or weird thing that you may be like freaking out about. It's not that. Secondly, make sure your RAM is clicked in all the way into the motherboard. There will be boot problems if it isn't, so make sure that's in all the way. And then third, make sure your power connections are in all the way on the motherboard, graphics card, and SSD, because if they're not in all the way, it's not gonna work. So those are the three things I check, and if it still isn't working, go to Google and Google your problem and then add on to that Reddit. But I seriously doubt with the complexity of this gaming PC, you're gonna be messing up. It's so cheap and budget, it's gonna be too easy. And now, onto how to install Windows 10 and the graphics card drivers. Okay, now we're going to install Windows 10 and show you how to install drivers. But first, I want you to go into the BIOS to enable the XMP profile for your RAM. This way your RAM can be running at the advertised speed, so 3200 megahertz, and it won't be running at 2066 like what I have here. So to get to this, whenever your PC boots up, just go ahead and spam the delete key. And if you don't get here by accident, you can just exit out of the installation. Just click that little X and it'll just reboot your PC automatically. And you can try again. press the delete key or the function 2 key, and yeah, you'll get here. So at least for the ASRock BIOS here, I'm gonna click on auto. And now we're set to profile 1, which is at that 3200 megahertz option. And that's it. Yeah, that easy. We'll go ahead and save and exit, and boom. All right, anyways, once you've done that, here's the Windows installation screen. You basically made it, you're done. But let's go ahead and install this. So install now, blah, 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 da, 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 da. Just wait. There we go. So this is the activate Windows screen. Thankfully, I already pre-activated this PC because I already built it. I'm just reinstalling Windows for you guys for this tutorial and the drivers. But I did get my key from DigitalChillMart, and getting it was not that bad. I just had to go onto their website, search up a Windows 10 Home, or I guess Pro key. Either one doesn't matter. Just make sure you choose the right one here in the Windows installation. Purchased it through my PayPal, got the key through my email, copied and pasted it, or not copied and pasted. I just went ahead and copied word for word and number for number the activation code here in the Activate Windows bar. But I did that, it activated, and it was all good to go. And that key was only like $20-ish from DigitalChillMart, and it worked on its first try. So hey, if you want inexpensive Windows 10 Pro keys or home keys, go ahead and check out DigitalChillMart. They'll hook you up. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and install Windows 10 Pro just for the heck of it. I already installed Windows 10 Home before this. It doesn't matter. I accept license and terms. Custom, there's our single 500 gigabyte SSD. If you don't see anything pop up here, it either means 1, there's no SATA power being run to your SSD, so no power cable, or 2, there's no SATA data cable, so no like just typical SATA cable that came with your motherboard. You've got to hook that from your SSD to your motherboard. Make sure those 2 connections are on your SSD going to the power supply and to the motherboard. But if it's there and you did it right, hit next, and there you go. Yeah. All right, so after your PC reboots a few times here and there, you should see this. This is the next part of setting up Windows. Again, super easy. Choose your country. Yeah, you guys aren't gonna see that. I'll just say I don't have internet for now. Continue with limited setup. If you have a Hotmail account and you have internet, it'll ask you to sign in through there, but for me, it doesn't know. So I'm just gonna say this is ScatterVolt. There we go. I'm gonna put ScatterVolt, security question 1, ScatterVolt, security question 2, ScatterVolt, security question 3, ScatterVolt. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now all this stuff I turn off. It's just unnecessary items that'll be running in the background. Could bog up your performance. I just turn it all off. Nope, don't need that. And now you just let Windows do its thing. It'll set up in about, I'd say a few minutes. All right, this is the Windows home screen. You made it. You're pretty much done, but let's install those drivers. I went ahead and connected to Wi-Fi just now so I can have access to the internet. So if you have a Wi-Fi card, plug that in, or just go ahead and connect to Wi-Fi. First, we're gonna go ahead and install graphics card drivers, and this is very easy. So I'm actually gonna have side by side where to get drivers for both an NVIDIA graphics card and an AMD graphics card. Though in this system we have the 750 Ti, so we're just gonna go ahead and actually use the NVIDIA download. But I'm just showing you what you would also do if you had, say, like an RX 560, like what I was recommending earlier. Anyways, for the 750 Ti, 750, there you go, search, boom, shakalaka, yep. If you didn't even know what card you had and you had an AMD system, you can use this auto detect tool, but I don't need that. So let's say you had an RX 560, just type that bad boy in, and yeah, there and then you submit, and then you wait for the download to finish, and then you run it like any program on a Windows 10 desktop, and yeah. This isn't complicated, guys. Okay, so to find our chipset drivers, we're gonna type in our motherboard name into Google, which is the ASRock B560 HDV, just about that. There it is, B560 HDV. Go to support, go to download, And there's all of our drivers that we may need. You don't necessarily need every single one of these, but get as many that apply to you, which for us will be the audio drivers, INF, which I believe are the chipset drivers. If you're using an Ethernet cable, you have a LAN driver right here. You don't have that. Intel management driver, I don't believe you need. Don't need that. Don't need that. We already downloaded our graphics card drivers just now, so we don't need VGA. Don't need that because that's a utility. That's a utility. That's Norton, so no. And this we don't necessarily need. I will say definitely download the drivers for your Wi-Fi adapter if you're using Wi-Fi. That will be found on a separate website for your actual like USB or PCI Wi-Fi dongle. Go ahead and set up. Just click where it says setup and you're pretty much good. Set up. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just click where it says setup, hit next, accept, install. Yeah. It's gonna go black. It's okay. It's normal. We're gonna click finish, and here's our audio drivers. Look at that. This reminds me of Windows XP. It reminds me of better times. No, I'm gonna restart my computer later because I believe that's it. So with all that said, the benchmarks, the parts list, how to build this PC, how to set it up, if you are going to pull the trigger on this PC, something I would really keep in mind is the actual performance of this computer on games that aren't free to play, super popular on Twitch, like those sort of games that are kind of meant to be run on any computer, like Apex Legends, League of Legends, Fortnite, Warzone, that sort of stuff. It's gonna run fine on this PC, But if you get into anything remotely exquisite or anything that costs $60 on release, this PC will struggle with that 750 Ti 2GB graphics card, which is why I'd bump it up to the RX 560 4GB card, because that will give you a lot more performance for only about $35 more. But even then, that's not going to be completely future-proof. Like I said, this gaming PC has a burner graphics card. It's just simply going to be temporary. It's not the one I intend for you to keep for the rest of the eternity of your gaming PC's lifespan. But even then, if you do get an actual graphics card in the future, that spare like 750 Ti or RX 560 can be one that you can have just on hand as a spare if you need to do any troubleshooting or if you want to resell it in another gaming PC. And it's so cheap, it's not really going to be that big of a hit to your bank account. But other than that, I mean, this PC has everything else that I expect for a budget gaming PC. It has a solid quad-core processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, a reliable 500 gigabyte SSD, a good enough motherboard, and a case that can support any configuration while not being crazy expensive. So, I mean, other than the graphics card situation, this is a typical $500 gaming PC I would put out if it were like 2 years ago. Just graphics cards are a little bit hard to get, but fortunately we can count on AliExpress, which will only give you like 3 to 4 week shipping times. So yeah. Anyways, that is it for this gaming PC build video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you made it to the end of this video, you probably liked what you saw. And if you did, press that subscribe button, because why not? What are you gonna do? Check back on my uploads every now and then? No, just let YouTube do it for you. And then turn on notifications too if you want to see exactly when they upload. I've also got Twitch, TikTok, and a Twitter and an Instagram I'm pretty active on, so follow those if you want to become more involved with the ScatterVolt community. And with all that said, again, thank you for watching another build guide of mine, and this is the ScatterVolt channel, signing out.